on your screen so it shows. Let's see, and let me refresh the page.
All right, we're just gonna give it a second.
Okay, you're live.
Hi guys, I'm Elisabeth from Croix Saddlery, and today we're doing our bit of lunch with Judy from Toklat. She's the sales manager for Myler Bits. So we're gonna learn all about how to properly bit your horse, what the right bit is. We're gonna talk a little bit about the trial program that we have going on, and we're gonna ask some questions. We're gonna save all of the very, very specific questions for something else, since we don't have a lot of time today, and that takes up a lot of time. So we are going to put those in the comments, and we'll deal with those later. So I'm gonna let Judy take it from here and let her introduce herself.
Hey guys. Hi, St. Croix. Thanks for having me. Yeah, my name is Judy, and I work for Toklat Originals. We partnered with Mylar about 20 years ago to take their handmade line and make it more readily available to the public. So we do the imported line of Myler Bits, and we have a huge selection. And then it's complemented by the fact that the Mylars still hand make bits in Missouri. So if there's something that we don't have that you need, you can still get it. But yeah, so where would you like to start, Elisabeth?
Well, let's start with what makes Myler Bits different from other bits?
So Mylar is, one of the big questions we get is, what does Mylar mean? And that it actually is a family name. So Ron, Dale, and Bob are the Mylar brothers, and they're based in Missouri, and they are third generation horsemen. So they started designing bits probably in the 1980s. Ron Mylar was a cutter, and he was trying to figure out how it took so long, why it took so long to put a young horse together. They started experimenting. Bob is a welder. He started making bits, trying to experiment. And they kind of came to an interesting conclusion after a lot of experimentation and research with the three of them. And that was that most of the issues people have with bits and horses have with bits can be directly connected to excessive tongue pressure. So at the heart of it, with the Mylar is not really about all the bits. They designed this concept, but Mylar is really about how you think about bits. It's a completely different way of thinking about bits. So if you are talking about tongue pressure, one of the things that people don't realize is how important your tongue is until you can't use your tongue. So while you're standing here talking to me and you're relaxed, your tongue is resting on the roof of your mouth and it's filling the entire cavity, right?
Yeah.
It's sitting in the bottom would be abnormal. Like you just have never thought about it before. And if you go to the dentist and they restrict your tongue, like you don't mind it until the saliva starts to build up. And then you start to get anxious and you're like, when are they going to vacuum my mouth? When's that going to happen? And your anxiety gets out of proportion to the end result, which is you will drool. And logically they've seen drool before, so that's not really a cause for anxiety. But why you're getting anxious is because you can't move your tongue. And at some point your brain kicks in and says, why can't you move your tongue? If you can't move your tongue, you can't run. If you can't run, you can't escape. And swallowing is a reflexive involuntary action. It's so important to your body's movement that your brain doesn't let you be in control of it. It's just like breathing and blinking. So horses operate the same way. And what the Mylars figured out is the reason horses have issues with bits is because if the bit is applying pressure on the tongue can't move. If you persist with that pressure beyond when you need to, then the horse starts to get panicky. Like his lizard brain kicks in and starts to fight that pressure. And what happens when you, especially riding English, where you have constant contact on the reins, so the mouthpiece that causes that kind of tongue pressure is this one. So, and in English especially, this is the most ubiquitous mouthpiece in the world. Everybody has ridden in this mouthpiece. Everybody has 4 or 5 of these, I'm sure, in your hoard of bits.
Yes, yes, I do.
With different cheek pieces. So the action of this mouthpiece, when you pull back on the rein, is your degree of pull from the saddle is like this. So what happens is it will pull and rotate down, and it will apply a huge amount of tongue pressure, which is great if you're trying to teach your horse to give to the bit. So when you apply the tongue pressure, the tongue can't move, the horse can't go forward, the horse gives to the pressure, you release the pressure, the horse gets to understand what the rein pressure means. It means give to that pressure. The issue is when the horse has learned to give to the rein pressure, but you insist on using that pressure over and over again, and you insist on using the tongue as a primary pressure point over and over again. Because what you do is you set your horse up for failure. You're in an arena, you're schooling, and you're on the rein, you want your horse on the bit, on the vertical, you've got that contact, and when your horse is right where you want him to be, that mouthpiece is interfering with his ability to stay there completely. So what happens is your horse goes very nicely for a few strides. And then he'll do something. He'll either stick his nose in the air, stick his tongue out of his mouth, open his mouth, tuck his nose to his chest. Some horses root where they drive down and it throws you off balance. And all those are strategies. We call them the signs of resistance. And they're strategies that that horse is employing to get some tongue relief so he can come back to you and continue doing the thing he was supposed to be doing. So what ends up happening is you get a really frustrated rider whose horse is seesawing around the arena. And you're like, you were really nice. Why can't you just keep being really nice all the way around? Why do you keep doing this thing that you're doing? And some horses handle it mentally. They cope. So a very passive resistance would be opening your mouth over the bit. When a horse opens his mouth over the bit, if he's on the vertical, it will drop his lower jaw behind the vertical. He releases the tongue pressure. That's very passive. He's trying to stay where he's supposed to, but he's trying to relieve the pressure so he can continue moving forward. A more active kind of resistance is the horse that goes up in the air. Bit slides back, he can swallow, but when he inverts like that, you kind of don't have anything you can do with him, right? You have to wait for him to come back down so you can then engage the rein. So that's kind of what is a little bit different about Mylar is this mouthpiece. We wouldn't say it's a bad mouthpiece in and of itself. We would just say it's a completely overused mouthpiece. And any mouthpiece that when you pick it up in the middle and it collapses, we call those broken bits. So your French links, Dr. Bristol's, lozenge bits, your single joints like this, those are all what we consider to be level 1 bits, and they apply a huge amount of tongue pressure. So all Mylar means is we are trying to bit every horse for as much tongue relief as that horse can mentally handle. So instead of changing this out to a full cheek, changing this out to an egg butt, say mouthpiece, which means nothing to the horse, we're trying to find mouthpieces and design mouthpieces that give horses more tongue relief so they can stay where you're asking them to stay and you're not interfering with their ability to stay there. So that at the root of it, it's a very simple concept. It's tongue pressure and tongue relief. And for those of you who are, this is a new concept, what I would suggest when you're at home by yourself is you test it. You can stick your finger in your mouth and hold your tongue down and try to run and see how far you get. Because your tongue, if you can't move your tongue, you can't go forward. You can't continue forward. And your horse is exactly the same way. So that's the only difference between Mylar and everything else. You probably have in your hoard of bits. Once we're done talking today, you can go home and separate them all out and you can sort them by tongue pressure, tongue relief, and see what you have. But when we talk about bits for horses, we focus on the mouthpiece. We don't care what the cheek piece is. That's the second part of the conversation. So mouthpiece is for the horse, cheek piece is for the rider, and focus on getting the right mouthpiece for your horse and then worry about the cheek piece after. And so that's kind of how we approach.
So the mouthpieces have to do with the levels of Mylar, right? Because we know there's a level 1, level 2, a 2, 3, and a 3. A lot of people don't know what that means. Can you kind of go over that along with the mouthpieces?
Yeah, for sure. So on the bits, like when you go to St. Croix, you'll see hanging on all the mouthpieces, these little tags. And the level 1, 2, 2, 3, and 3 levels on the mouthpiece simply refer to the degree of tongue pressure that mouthpiece applies. So the mouthpieces we were just talking about, like this one. Where did my, this guy. So those are what we call level 1, maximum tongue pressure. Sometimes people think because this is in level 1, they think this is a soft mouthpiece. But for us, level 1 is the hardest mouthpieces. They apply the maximum tongue pressure with no tongue relief. Level 2 will introduce some tongue relief. It still uses the tongue as a pressure point, but there is some tongue relief there. And as you go up to level 2, 3, and level 3, when you get to level 3, those mouthpieces use no tongue pressure at all. They're using other pressure points. I mean, there's like 5 other places you can apply pressure on a horse's head that will communicate what you want to do. And so if you can take the focus off the tongue and the interference with the tongue's ability to move, then you're going to get a horse that moves better, thinks better. It's just like people. So if you're sitting in a classroom, for example, and you're hot or you're cold or you're tired or you're hungry, your retention is really low. So you know this from being in school. If you're focused on your comfort or your lack of comfort, then you don't learn very well. And so if you have a horse that's not bitted properly, then that horse is going to take longer to learn what you're trying to teach him. He's not going to retain it as well, and he's not going to be as consistent in his performance. So the levels help us to categorize the mouthpieces so that the second part of that is figuring out how much tongue relief can my horse manage mentally. The more tongue relief you give a horse, the more freedom you give him. Because if you can't take the tongue, then you can't take the horse. That's the old saying. So if you're giving up the tongue as a pressure point, and you're applying pressure on the bar, the lip, the chin, or the pole, or all of them, then all of those are pressure points that the horse can ignore unless he's properly educated. So it's really a case of trying to figure out what level mouthpiece you really need to be looking at for your horse. And for us, we don't recommend level 1 mouthpieces. We make level 1 mouthpieces, right? And people are always surprised when we say that. But we have, like, this is a level 1 mouthpiece. It's a quite nice mouthpiece. Probably a lot of you out there have it. It's the O2. It was dressage legal before any other Mylar, but it applies a lot of tongue pressure, and there's no tongue relief. So for us, we would rather go to a level 2. So this is an example of a level 2. So it still breaks. So it's going to apply tongue pressure. But when you look at it, and I'll see if I can hold it up where you can kind of see the front of it, you can see that it has a little bit of an arch in the middle, which is it's a small port. And that port is just passageway for the tongue. So the word port means doorway or passageway. And so the port is there to give the tongue a place to go. So in English especially, people aren't really sure what ports are for. They kind of associate them with Western, and they kind of associate them with severe bits.
Yeah.
Like palate pressure bits, right? But a port is just a passageway. And so when you get up into level 2, 3, and level 3, so here's an example of a 2, 3. This is actually dressage legal. So it has a port, but you'll see it doesn't collapse. It's solid. And so that means it's not going to rotate down onto the tongue. The port on this bit, though, when you look at it from the side, I'm not very good at the reverse seeing. Because the port's tipped forward. And so that does 2 things. It opens up a huge amount of room behind the bit so that the horse can move his tongue and swallow. But the forward tilt is going to actually allow you to, let's see if I can get this right. When you pull back, it's going to rotate down and apply a little bit of tongue pressure. It's not going to be as much as a broken bit, like a level 1 mouthpiece, but it's going to use the tongue as a pressure point. So we were talking before we started about jumping. That forward tilted port mouthpiece is a really nice bit for jumpers because it gives a huge amount of tongue relief, but the rider can take the tongue a little bit if needed. If, when a horse gets amped up on a course, they get really, really energized if they love their job. And you just need to remind them that you're up there and you've counted the strides and you know what they need to do to get over the next jump safely. And that's what the 36 is really good at. And so the port is not high enough for palate pressure. The port is just there for the tongue to pass under it. And that's what happens in level 2, 3, and level 3. They're all ported bits to different degrees to allow different degrees of tongue relief and tongue pressure.
And it looks like that tongue pressure compared to the 1 to the 3, it's a little bit wider. So it looks, correct me if I'm wrong, does it give a little bit more widespread tongue pressure than the level 1?
This will be a lot of tongue. There's just a lot of room here for the tongue. So it's going to sit in a horse's mouth like this. And when they swallow, they can get under the bit. So level 3 version, which is this is a dressage legal level 3 mouthpiece. So you can see how wide it is. So it's about an inch. It's less than 30 millimeters because that's the highest you can have for dressage. So from here to here, it's less than 30 millimeters. But it's so wide that it's going to sit like this in a horse's mouth. And when the horse swallows, the bit he can pass completely under the bit. And this bit, when you engage the reins, will pass on either side of the tongue. You get a little bar lip pressure, and that's it, because it's just a plain ring cheek. So that's like the top end where there's no tongue pressure whatsoever at all, and it's complete tongue relief. And so what that horse is riding off of is a little bar lip pressure, but seat and leg aids. So for example, in dressage, a lot of Grand Prix horses should be in this kind of mouthpiece, because they're not using the rein aid. The rein aid is baby talk. They passed by that years ago. When they get to that level of technical accomplishment, they don't need that degree of tongue pressure that a younger horse needs. They write off the seat and the leg aids. They know their job. And so the less interference, the better. So that's exactly how the port works.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Got it. So how do you know if you have a bitting issue with your horse? Like you kind of talked about it earlier, you know, the opening the mouth, the rooting. Is there any other like major issues, and how would you correct kind of the bigger ones?
So what we look at, we call those the signs of resistance. And people get kind of hyper-focused on my horse does this thing, right? Because a lot of times it can be scary. So if you have a horse that starts inverting where they put their nose in the air, and then they get to the point where they start flinging their heads around, or just, you know, they can get increasingly sour and rank, and sometimes they can escalate to bucking and rearing and really negative and dangerous behaviors like that. So for us, it doesn't matter which behavior they choose. I mean, there's going to be certain control and safety issues that we consider, but for the most part, if you come to me and you've eliminated saddle fit, you've eliminated dental issues, I mean, we recommend dentists twice a year to make sure everything in the mouth is healthy. And obviously saddle fit issues, make sure you've eliminated that. I would say, we always say that, but 99% of the time, these behaviors are directly related to the bit. And it would be the gaping, the tongue over the bit, tongue out of the mouth, rooting, leaning, inverting, going behind the bit. All of those for us are just symptoms of a problem. It's like the cold and flu symptoms. You can try to treat each one, but at the end of the day, the root of the problem is that horse is objecting to the degree of tongue pressure that you're applying. And some horses are very fragile mentally, and they can't handle, I have Arabs. And if they are unhappy, everybody knows. Like they're super dramatic about everything. And you can tell right away. Some horses, like quarter horses, are very stoic. And you can't always tell. It can take a rider a little bit to kind of figure out that that horse is not completely comfortable. But I find most riders intuitively know when their horse is not happy. Like they even if the horse is behaving properly, they know that there's something not quite, because they're communicating.
Yes.
The bit is the one piece of equipment that can really affect your relationship with your horse. You can have, you know, saddle fit issues and pads and leg boots and martingales and all kinds of equipment, but the one thing that really affects your communication with your horse is the bit. And people tend to dismiss it. They don't, I mean, I honestly, and you've probably had this in the store, people come in and ask you about bits, and you say, well, what kind of bit are you using now? And they'll say, oh, it's a full cheek. And I always say, because I'm a Mylar person, what's the mouthpiece? Oh, I don't know.
Yeah.
Or it's headbutt. I don't know. And I'm like, seriously, how many times do you ride per week and you put this thing on your horse and you don't know what it is? Like you can't even visualize what that thing is that you put in your horse's mouth. And so we tend to dismiss it, but it is the one piece of equipment that's really important to your communication and safety and control of your horse. And so it's paying attention. And most riders can intuitively know that something's wrong, but those signs of resistance are essentially just a symptom of excessive tongue pressure. It's a really simple concept. So then it's just finding, well, how much tongue relief should I give this horse? And there's two important questions to helping people bit their horses. The first one is, well, what kind of personality does your horse have? So we used to ask, what does your horse know? Does he know side passing and collection? And at the end of the day, listening to Dale talk to people over the years, it wasn't very long. I think it was like 3 or 4 years in working with Dale that I heard him start to ask different questions. He stopped asking, like, what does your horse know technically? And he started asking, like, how is your horse's personality? Because what it comes down to is, if you're trying to bid a horse for as much tongue relief as he can mentally handle, then you have to know what he can mentally handle. Yeah. And so if the way I usually ask people is on a spectrum of one end is your very flighty, anxious, insecure horse. And on the other end is your really bold, challenging, dominant horse. And then somewhere in the middle, where does your horse fall? Which end of that spectrum? The better behaved, the more center, the kinder, more honest, and the more obedient the horse is, then the less tongue relief that horse really needs. The periphery, the extremes, are going to need something completely different. But most people feel like their horses are somewhere in the middle. And so the personality, the better behaved and the kinder and more consistent that horse is, the more tongue relief that horse should have. The second part of the equation is, what kind of spook does your horse have? because a spook will tell you about that horse's self-control. So I have Arabs, so we're all about the spooking. But even my youngest Arab, when I first took her off the trailer and brought her home, she was 2 years old, and she came off that trailer and she was twitchy. That's the only way to describe it, the Arab twitchiness. But she held herself together. And I've had her for 6 years now, and I would say of my 4 horses, she has the most self-control, and she demonstrated it from day one. So she might spook a little, but she's never going to spook and run. She's going to twitch. But then she's going to, a good spook in place is a horse with really excellent self-control. And what that means is you can also bit that horse for more tongue relief, because you can trust that that horse has self-control and isn't going to blow up and take off. If you have a horse that does blow up and bolt at the first sign of trouble, then that's an issue that has to be addressed, differently. We have to find a balance between giving that horse enough tongue relief, but also having the rider have the ability to take the horse in a situation where he does that. And people like to say, well, my horse is really great 98% of the time. And we bit for the 2%. So you bit for worst case scenario. So those are the ways we kind of drill into what level. And quite frankly, if you have a horse that's mature and has any training and experience under saddle and has been educated to any degree, most of the time they're going to be level 2, 3, or level 3. If you are starting a young horse, or if you get a horse that you don't know, so you've just bought a horse and maybe don't know its background, don't know its history, aren't sure what bits have been used, then level 2 is a good place to go. And that 04 Mouthpiece, this little guy, not in this cheek piece, but in this Mouthpiece, it's going to act like a snaffle, like a regular single joint, because it's going to use tongue pressure, but it's going to introduce some tongue relief. So it's a really nice starting bit for most horses. And for horses you don't know very well, or horses that have been ridden exclusively in single jointed mouthpieces for a really long time. This would be a change, but this mouthpiece would be not a dramatic change. So it gives them kind of an incremental work towards the goal of more tongue relief. So, and I do have people ask me once in a while, well, if level 3 is the softest bit and it's the most tongue relief, why don't I start my young horse in that? Because it's a baby and I want to be kind to it. And I think anybody that handles, a 1,000-pound baby knows that you need to be kind and humane, but you also need to maintain authority and discipline, or you pretty soon will have a train wreck. So that's why we start a horse with the tongue pressure, because the tongue pressure makes them give to the bit. That teaches them what to do. And then you work your way towards the goal of maximum tongue relief. But it's a goal to achieve. It's not, some horses will never get there. Some horses are too forward or too bold, and they'll take advantage, and they're opportunists, and they'll take advantage of the rider. So, but it's always the kind of the goal that you want to aspire to, is to try to get as close to level 3 as you can.
So right now, Judy, it looks like we have a question from a couple of our viewers right now. But before we do that, since we have a couple viewers right now, we should announce our giveaway for the Mylar, right? Yeah. So Dale Myler, the owner and creator of Myler Bits, has generously agreed to give the one lucky winner a bit of their choice and a private bidding seminar for their horse. So later today, check our Facebook page and see how we're going to do that. We're keeping a little bit of a secret right now, but we'll definitely do it later so we can kind of track everybody who's entering on Facebook. Yeah. So keep an eye out for that a little bit later today. Our first question is there a recommended toolbox of bits to figure out a better bit for your horse?
Kind of. So for us, especially in English, and like I said, the mouthpiece is for the horse, the cheek piece is for the rider. So if you wanted to have a kit, say you have a barn full of horses and you just wanted to have some bits on hand that you wanted to test out, the most important mouthpieces are going to be the 04, which is, and again, ignore the cheek piece, which is this little level 2 mouthpiece.
And is that legal for dressage?
It is. Okay. And just coincidentally, all the mouthpieces I'm going to show you are all dressage legal.
Okay. Is there a certain quick way we can find out if they're dressage legal or not?
You can, I can give you a laminated poster that you can have in the store. You can go to our website, but we would rather that they come to your website.
Okay.
And I mean, you can read the rule book, but it's quite frankly super confusing to people, both USEF and FEI. The mouthpieces that I'm showing are USEF and FEI legal, FYI.
Okay, so perfect. If there's any questions our viewers have about if they're legal for dressage or not, you can just give us a call or message us.
For sure. So yeah, so the 04, the 36, which is the forward tilted port, the 33, but not necessarily the dressage legal 33. This is our standard 33, and we have it in, this is a Weymouth, but we have it in the egg butt and the D as well. The standard 33 offers more tongue relief than the dressage legal 33. So if you were not worried about dressage and you just wanted to have a bit in your toolbox, we would definitely recommend the regular 33 mouthpiece. And the 06, which I think I have floating around here. Yeah, nope, they're all 36s. The 06 looks almost exactly the same as the 36, but instead of being tilted forward, the port just goes straight up and down. But these, the 04, the 36, and the 33 are probably the most important mouthpieces. And then the cheek piece is a different conversation. The legal bits for dressage are all ring bits. So either the egg butt, the D ring like this, or the loose ring. But for schooling, we don't recommend regular ring bits. We recommend the cheeks with hooks. And the reason being, I'll use the loose ring because it's the really best example of why we don't like ring bits. So when you're trying to teach a horse anything, a young horse especially, so a lot of people use a loose ring because it's pretty inoffensive, which is totally true. When it comes to the horse, they can move the mouthpiece up and down. The rider can't do anything with the bit really except pull on it or not pull on it. But you can't really control the mouthpiece. So everything moves, and it moves in the bridle, and the cheek piece or the mouthpiece moves on the cheek piece. The rein slides around the ring. So all of it together makes for really confusing and unclear signal. So we recommend the cheeks with hooks. We do the egg butt and the D both. And the hooks just refer, the hook is an old name from a really old style that the Mylars did years ago. But it's basically the slots in the cheek. And so if you were going to have a little toolkit of bits, I would get those 3 mouthpieces in the cheeks with hooks. You buckle the bit onto the bridle up here. And it basically operates exactly like a full cheek with bit keepers, where it keeps the bit in the right position, which is why we don't sell very many full cheeks anymore, because of the cheeks with hooks. So it will keep the bit stable in the bridle. And then when you buckle the rein on the slot down here, you'll have a little bit of slide, like a regular ring bit, but it's going to stop right here just below the mouthpiece, and it lets you lift the cheek. So what that lets you do as a rider is use the independent side movement that every Mylar, just about every Mylar has. This barrel in the middle just allows each side of the bit to move independently of the other. So what you get is a really clear signal. Like you can lift your horse's shoulder, you get really good vertical and lateral flexion. And then the little loops on the top are so you can add curb strap or a curb chain. Most people prefer the strap. So what the curb strap does is and I don't know if I can show this, but it keeps the bit from over rotating. So the curb actually is there to protect the horse from the mouthpiece over rotating. And it helps engage the pole. So the cheek with hooks is just a really sophisticated system for taking the pressure off the tongue and using bar lip, a little bit of pole pressure, and chin pressure. And that's just basically it's indirect rein action, but without any leverage. That you normally associate indirect rein action with a leveraged cheek like a Western shank. But there's no leverage on this bit because it's a 1-to-1 ratio, purchase to shank. And so there's no leverage, but you get the sophistication of the indirect rein action. So those 3 mouthpieces in the cheeks with hook with a curb strap, you could bit just about any horse that's out there and do a better job of bitting them than you would with just a bunch of snaffles, single jointed snaffles. So I would say that is, and then I would throw in the combination bit because it's my favorite bit.
Why is it your favorite bit?
What's that?
Why is the combo your favorite bit?
So
I know a lot of people here think there's a lot going on.
There is a lot.
I don't really know much about it.
Yeah. So the beauty of the combination bit, people get a little, especially in English, they get a little put off because the cheek piece is so long. But I'm going to show you why there's no actual leverage. So the beauty of I just twisted it all around. The beauty of the combination bit and the thing that's patented is this connection if you can see it through the purchase. The nose and the chin strap are connected. So when you pull back on the rein, it causes this to rotate. It lifts the chin up and it pulls down on the nose piece. So the effect, when you engage the rein, the first thing that happens is nose, chin, and pull pressure. If your horse responds to that, the mouthpiece is going to stay at the bottom of this ring. It's not going to engage at all. So you essentially can get your horse on the vertical without any tongue pressure whatsoever. Your horse is carrying the mouthpiece, but you're not using the mouthpiece. If he ignores the nose, chin, and pull pressure, the mouthpiece will start to move as you engage the rein more. And if he feels that movement and he comes back to you, everything releases and relaxes again. So that's 2 warnings he's had. Now, if he ignores that and he goes to the 3rd step, then it's going to stop. There's a stop on the bit. So it's not a gag bit, even though it looks like a gag cheat. There's no gag action. So when it stops, it's going to do whatever the mouthpiece is designed to do. In this particular case, it's a level 3 mouthpiece, so it's not going to do anything. There's no tongue pressure whatsoever. It's going to be a little bar lip pressure. But the effect that it has on a horse is that you can really ride into the bridle and not interfere with that horse's ability to move his tongue around. So you don't trigger that next step of anxiety or the escalation of behavior that the horse is trying to get to. So I start all of my horses in the combination bit with the 04 mouthpiece, that level 2 mouthpiece. And I keep them in it for as long as I possibly can. And then, so basically that's their starting and intermediate bit. And then once they're going consistently, riding off my seat and my legs, and I feel like I'm not really using the bit so much, I'll just switch them over. In my case, I prefer a little short shank. I have a little tiny handmade short shank that the Mylar's made for me with a level 3 mouthpiece. And that's essentially their finished bit. And that's all, and most of my horses, I would say 3 out of the 4 have never been ridden with any kind of tongue pressure. And they don't even know what tongue pressure is. But it keeps them very light, very soft. It allows the rider to kind of develop a much better hand because you can set your hands where you want your horse to stay. And the combo bit, as long as the horse stays there, there's no pressure on the horse. It's only when the horse leaves, starts to, for example, on a jump course, we sell a lot of combo bits for cross country and for jumping, because horses get a lot of forward dynamic energy going, but as soon as you pull back with a regular snaffle, you apply all that tongue pressure, and horses have to swallow more when the respiration goes up. The harder you work, the more you have to swallow. And so, as any runner would know, so you kind of set up this conflict where you're trying to grab the horse at the time when he needs to really have the most tongue relief that he needs, but you need to rate his speed, you need to maneuver, you need to give him the right signals. And the combo can do that without interfering with the horse's ability to swallow. And that's why you see in jumpers, you see all kinds of weird, like hackamore with a snaffle and I've seen them zip tied together, and they're trying to find that combination. Yeah, and the combo does that. That's kind of where it excels. So that's my favorite tool.
God. So
it's super fun to use.
You told us you have a custom little shank, right?
Huh?
Mylar does custom bits. So
they do. They hand make bits, so they can pretty much make whatever combination of things you're interested in. So if you're trying to find a particular size and we don't have it in the mouthpiece cheek piece that you want, then they can hand make it for you. And St. Croix can get it for you. So for sure. Like if you have mini horses, they make mini driving bits. I have on my keychain actually a mini mouthpiece because it's so cute. And I just have it as my key fob. And so they make mini bits. They make huge draft size bits. They can make, if you want a mix of materials that we don't offer. So if you want cyprium or you want sweet iron on an English cheek piece, which we don't offer, then they can make it for you.
But you said, we were talking a little earlier, and you said that the combo bit and one loose ring is a sweet iron bit.
Yeah.
And a lot of the Western bits are as well.
All of the Western bits,
right?
Yeah. All of the Western bits and the combo bit, and then we have one loose ring 02 are sweet iron mouthpieces. So sweet iron, if you're not familiar with it, will end up looking like this. So this is the sweet iron. This is always stainless steel. The cheek piece is always stainless steel. It's the bar here that's sweet iron. And the reason sweet iron is so popular in Western, excuse me, is because it releases, it's actually oxidizing, not rusting. And as it oxidizes, it releases a sweet taste, and it makes horses more willing to take the bit. So it's very common in Western. Almost all Western bits have sweet iron. In English, we don't offer it because English writers are not familiar with it, and we just get a lot of complaints about rusty bits. So, yeah, so all of the if it's an English cheek, then it's going to be completely stainless steel bit with copper. All of our bits have copper inlay here, whether it's English or Western. And so, but we do the combination bit because it's not discipline specific. It can be used for anything, English, Western, endurance, whatever you want to do with it. We opted to do sweet iron because it's a better performing mouthpiece in terms of getting horses to accept the bit. So all of our combination bits are sweet iron as well. And then that one loose ring.
So we have another viewer question, and she's a trail rider, and she asks, would you recommend the hook cheek rather than a round ring for a horse that sometimes gets strong-headed?
Yes. For strong-headed, I would first look at the mouthpiece. So, and a lot of people say my horse has a hard mouth. You know, I've got a hard-mouthed horse. So at first I would look at the mouthpiece because a lot of times strong-headed, where they're pushing, like they're just getting really pushy on the bit, a lot of times that is because you're riding in a single-jointed mouthpiece. So first, I would figure out what mouthpiece I needed to get. And then, yes, we will always recommend the hooks over a regular ring cheek because the hooks give the rider more control over the bit. It has built-in other pressure points, so the curb strap is there to protect the horse. You can engage the pole, which you can't do with a regular ring bit. On a regular ring bit, the only thing that's going to happen is you're going to pull on the rein, and it's going to slide to the point of least resistance, and then pull or not pull. That's it. You can't use the independent side movement at all. All you can do is pull or not pull. So the only horse really, especially in a loose ring that should be going in a ring like this, is a very finished horse because that horse is not using the bit as a primary aid. He's probably riding off seat and legs, and then the bit is just kind of incidental or a reinforcement for seat and leg aids. That's really the only horse that should be going in that, if at all. And it's a messy, sloppy cheek. And it does make horses really mouthy, which actually going back to something I should have said earlier, when we're talking about the signs of resistance, if you really want to know how your bit is working for your horse and you're riding in any kind of noseband that goes in front of the bit, you need to take it off. So we do not advocate the use of drop nosebands, flash nosebands, figure eights, cranks, anything that is designed to hold a horse's mouth shut over the bit, you need to take it off and just have a regular cavesson. Because if you have a horse that's gaping over the bit and your inclination is to strap his mouth shut so you don't lose points, then we just consider that to be not a kind thing to do. You need to address the gaping and not ignore it and not just pretend it doesn't exist. So I would say to get a good read on the mouthpiece, start paying attention to the mouthpiece and then figure out what mouthpiece your horse needs. And then, yes, the cheek with hooks would be a really good option for sure.
Got it. So we have another viewer question. And this one is, what is your suggestion if you ride both English and Western and need a shanked bit for Western?
If you have figured out what mouthpiece is working for your horse in either discipline, you can 90% of the time get that same mouthpiece in an English cheek. Cheek pieces for the rider, mouthpieces for the horse. So if you
sounds like a lot of this is what your horse likes in their mouth, and then the cheek is for the person.
Yes.
Where it's kind of like, okay, let's look at the horse first, see what they need, and then we'll look at the rider and see kind of how they go.
It's not the way any of us have been taught. And that's because if all of your mouthpieces, like if you go look at your bit wall, and if all of your mouthpieces are the same mouthpiece, then you start to distinguish bits by the cheek piece. So you start to focus on full cheek, egg butt, D, shank, no shank, short shank, long shank. But at the end of the day, none of that matters to your horse. The only thing that really matters is the mouthpiece. The cheek piece is just translating your rein signal. And you will adapt because you're a human being with a big brain and the ability to reason and logic. So you will adapt to whatever cheek piece is on your horse. If the mouthpiece isn't working, it's not going to matter what the cheek piece is. So, but if you are successful with one mouthpiece doing one thing, then just try that mouthpiece. And I've had people ask me that after the fact. Well, this is usually the reverse. I ride my horse Western and I have him in a level 3 mouthpiece, which is very soft. So I started doing some dressage lessons, and now I'm riding in the single jointed mouthpiece and I'm having issues. Well, clearly you went from riding in a really soft mouthpiece to riding in, not only riding in the strongest mouthpiece, but asking him to collect in a way you probably haven't asked him to before. So you've got two things going against him, and all you really need to do is find that level 3 mouthpiece and get it with an English cheek. And the flip is true as well. So it's really the mouthpieces for the horse and the cheek pieces for the rider.
So when we talk about mouthpiece, we've talked a lot about how it fits around the tongue, but how do we measure for a proper Mylar? Measure with it stretched out, but I've heard you want to push it together and measure it.
Basically, it's really hard to get, measuring is not objective. It seems like it should be, but it's not. So measure your horse first, and we usually recommend using the handle of a wooden spoon that you don't want anymore, because it's a pretty straight dowel. Or if you have a dowel, that's fine. Or a bit, if you have a bit fit, whatever the little tools are that help you measure. Yeah. Then measure, and measure to the outside lip approximately where the bit would sit. And that will give you the measurement. And then go to the next incremental bit size up. So Mylar we have variations across the mouthpieces, and we have variations over the years as we made the bits. So they do tend to be a little bigger than a standard 5-inch regular bit. If you're going to measure a Mylar, then there is the curve part, but the curve is actually different depending on when the bit was made. Because we make all of the bits from samples that the Mylars give us. So if they have changed, they're always thinking and always creating. And if it's 10 years between when we add a mouthpiece and they give us a sample to make the mouthpiece, it could be curved differently than it was 10 years ago, because they just keep evolving everything all the time. So in order to get an accurate measurement, I would lay it flat on a table and measure inside to inside, straight across. And a typical 5-inch bit will usually measure around 5 1/8. It might vary though. It could be as much as a 1/16 to an 1/8 of an inch difference on each side. And we really want to see, when a horse is bitted properly, we want to see at least an 1/8 of an inch to maybe a 1/4 inch of bit on each side of the face when the reins are relaxed and the bit's properly centered. And we want that because when you open a horse's mouth inside, there's about 1.5 inches of lip folded inside his mouth. So when he closes his mouth on the bar of a bit, his lip spreads. And we don't want the lip to touch the side of the bit. So the lip, if you've ever had, and I'm sure in Minnesota you have had chapped lips, from chapped lips how sensitive lip tissue is. It's a very thin layer of skin over the lip. So when you're using a bit, you want the lip to be a pressure point, but it should never be a friction point. And you should also never draw the bit up 2 to 3 wrinkles. That's just way too much. So for measuring, just measure straight across your horse's mouth, approximately where the bit would sit, and then translate that to the next size bit. The only time you have to be concerned about size is if it's really crazy sloppy. If you've got a pony and a 5 1/2, that's clearly not, there's just going to be too much side lateral movement. But anything shy of that, you get down to 1/8 to 1/4 inch of bit on each side of the face, it should be perfectly fine. We would much rather go bigger than smaller.
And we do have bit sizers at the store for anyone watching. It's well, I don't have dowel. We do have bit sizers that we can sell as well.
Nice.
I think, do we have any questions from our people in the store right now? Employees, family, friends?
Laura's helping someone.
Well, we talked about the combo bit. Sorry, I have a little cheat sheet here.
Yeah.
We talked about the hooks. We talked about the rusting, the oxidization.
We talked about that
a little bit. Didn't.
Laura's question.
All right, so here's another question that we have written down from one of our employees. How do I know if it's too big for my horse or not? How do I differentiate between when it's time to move up versus move down?
So that's a really good question. People tend to treat horses kind of like robots. So when I talk to people at an expo or I go to a store to do a talk, and they'll come in and tell me, I've been riding my horse and he suddenly started doing this thing and he's 12 years old and I haven't changed anything. This is the bit I started him in and now suddenly he's he's doing this behavior. And I always just look at them and say, well, that's because you haven't changed anything. So if you look at a bit as an information education tool for your horse, they're just like people. They graduate through an experience and information. So the single joint is your kindergarten bit. It's the very crude, apply the pressure, make you give to the bit, you learn to give to the bit, we move on from there. So if you start to think of horses in that regard, the signs of resistance are always going to tell you something's wrong. Now, yeah, a horse could be having an off day. And so he could just be not happy with the environment. Maybe you're riding with somebody you don't normally ride with and he doesn't like the other horse and he's being kind of a pill about it. But most riders, again, are pretty in tune with their horse. And if you see what we consider a sign of resistance and you see it coming up repeatedly and consistently and you associate it with your rein pressure, then listen to your horse. Don't write it off as he's just being he's just being a pill, he's having a moment, she's being a mare. That's when we hear all the time, oh, she's just a mare. And everybody that has ever said that to me when I'm trail riding with them, I can look at their horse and say, she's not being a mare. She's being a horse that knows the deal and she's not happy and we can fix that. It's an addressable issue. So don't just write it off as a bad behavior, especially if you see it repeated over and over again. Usually a horse, they're just like people. Like I twirl my hair when I'm nervous. Usually a horse will have a behavior that they go to express themselves as strung out, stressed out, worried, anxious. So they may gape, they may mouth, they may throw their heads around. And you just recognize that behavior. And now you know, hey, all right, so there could be something going on with the bit. I need to stop. I need to look at the bit. And if it's a level 2 or a level 2-3, then guarantee that you're probably going to need to move up and that you're going to need to change something. And you want to know what level the mouthpiece is because you don't want to make a lateral or backwards move. So I have people, like I go to equine affair every year and I see the same people over 6 or 7 years. And I'll come back after a couple of years. I'll see somebody I talked to 2 years before. Oh, I had my horse going really well in that level 3 mouthpiece, but he had this one day where he was kind of off. So I just went ahead and put his snaffle back on. I'm like, well, how's that working out? Oh, no, he hates it. He's acting all like crazy. And I'm like, well, that's not logical. It's not logical at all. You just went backwards. So it's important to know what the bit is and then think forward and think. It is hard as a horse owner when your horse is being kind of a pill for someone to say to you, you need to be softer, not stronger. Because the inclination is to go to a twist or a corkscrew. And those are bits. Anytime you change the bar of the bit, you simply are making the bit more painful. You are not training. You are not rewarding good behavior. You are not countering bad behavior. You are simply inflicting pain in order to get the horse to assert your authority over that horse. So, or twisted wires. Like in Western, they like the really thin, sharp bit. Going more severe doesn't fix the problem. And so we advocate you need to really go softer. And it's just, sometimes people struggle with it, but if you have a horse with a control issue, if you have a horse with a self-control issue, that's where the combo bit can come in because you can ride with a softer mouthpiece, but there's more there for the rider to maintain control and authority over the horse without just relying on the mouthpiece. So a lot of times with off-the-track thoroughbreds that are being freshly started, the more you pull back, the faster they go. So the combo bit works really well for that. So you can ride softer, but at the same time, maintain that authority. Horses that tend to be really unconfident can have a bolting issue. Now, there's no bit that will stop a horse once it's decided to bolt. So no bit manufacturer worth their salt. If you walk up to them and say, I need a bit that will stop my horse, nobody who knows anything is ever going to say, my bit will stop your horse. But we think we have a bit that would help you ask your horse to stop in a way that they could actually respond to. And that would be the combination bit. So it's really listening to your horse and understanding what the signs of resistance mean, but then also thinking forward and thinking less, not more, thinking softer, not harsher. That would be our goal. And
how long do you recommend trialing a bit? So I know Myler does a trial program that we are also a part of. Yep. So if you guys want to try any of the bits we're talking about today, we do behind me have a couple of them that we have for trial. It's $2 per week. That long for people to trial? How many rides do you recommend doing? That sort of stuff.
So there's a couple things going on there. One is transitioning. So if you get all excited like about one of these bits and it's completely different from anything that you've used before, the more different it is, the longer you need to give your horse to figure it out. Because horses are just like people. They hate change, they fear change, they resist change. They're like, nope, 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 nope. I don't want to do it. Even if you say it's better for them, it's just like dealing with children. Like, you know, eat this, you'll like it. Nope, 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 it looks weird, I don't like it.
Eat my vegetables.
Yes,
No.
exactly. And so horses are just like that. So the more different it is, so say you go from a single joint to a combination bit or a level 3, the more time they need. And you need to give them time to transition. So we recommend when you introduce the bit, any new bit, you do it on the ground, you bridle them up, get it adjusted, give them 5 minutes to kind of fart around with it, lift the rein at the wither and ask for contact and maintain the contact until they give. And as soon as they give even a little bit, you immediately release. And you want to really exaggerate it so that they understand right away, oh, if I do that, then I get released. And you just do that on each side until they're giving to the pressure easily and comfortably and their eye is soft. Then you can hop in the saddle and do the same thing, just a little bit of warm up without even walking. And then just start your warm up. And we recommend, I would say most horses, you need 6 or 7 rides before you figure out if that bit's going to work for that horse. And doing the transition, like taking 5 to 10 minutes each time to kind of give him a minute to get his head wrapped around the difference. So changing out the bit, if you're changing the pressure points you're using on a horse's head from all tongue to a variety, is like me sitting here literally just lapsing in the middle of a sentence into Russian or something. Like the entire audience would go blank, blank, what? Even if you spoke Russian, your brain would take some time to catch up. And so it's basically teaching, it's just, you're speaking to your horse in a completely different language. Give him a chance to figure it out and give him a chance to realize it is better. And then he just deserves that time. And then the rider's part of that is if you have been used to just pulling until you feel contact, now you have to concentrate and pay attention when you're lifting the rein from the ground. Look at how little it takes to engage that mouthpiece. And when you're riding, you try to just mentally imagine that and like adjust your hands accordingly. So you're not over reining, because that happens a lot too. And some riders don't know how to ride with a softer hand because they've just always gone right to the bit. Like they just want to feel that bit right off the bat. So there's 2 things going on. One is giving the horse time to figure it out. And then the other is giving you time to figure it out. And so I would say 6 or 7 rides. Some horses that have been, if they've been struggling, it maybe one time and they'll be like, oh, this is way better. But a lot of horses just take a little convincing and you have to persuade them. And so I'd say at least 6 or 7 rides.
Got it. So our trial program for a week is about the right time.
Yeah, if you can do it at least 3 or 4 times and feel confident, then I think I think that would be enough.
And we can also do 2 weeks, 3 weeks. It's $10 a week to trial our bits. But for this month of April, this is April 1st, if you are part of our round table, we'll put this in the round table as well. We are doing a free month of anything on our demo wall. So we've got the Myler Bits, we've got back on track quick wraps, we've got many types of wraps from royal riders to free jumps to tech. Anything on our trial wall is free for the month of April for St. Croix Saddlery Roundtable. Go ahead and add yourself to it. We'll watch it for the rest of forever, I guess, because it's our roundtable. We love you guys. We want you to be part of our family. And I have another question from another viewer. So they asked, they're starting the young horse. Is there a specific cheek piece you would recommend, or is it mostly just the mouthpiece?
The mouthpiece, I would start with the 04. My first choice, as I said before, is the combination bit. If that's just a little much for you to grasp, then I would definitely do a cheek with hooks. I would want something that keeps the bit stable in the mouth and that gives you complete control over the reins. The combo bit is ideal. You can lunge with it. You can, I've tied up my reins with it. You can use it kind of, like side reins. I've ground driven with it, but the cheek with hooks would be my second choice. And then the 04 mouthpiece is just a really nice starting mouthpiece. It's going to give you the tongue pressure you need to teach the horse to give to the bit, but it's going to give that little bit of tongue relief that will reward them when they're on the bit and you're not engaging the reins and they're going forward in the manner that you want them to. So I think that would be a really good tool.
And when choosing a mouthpiece, cheek piece, sorry, not about piece, what do you want riders to kind of look at themselves for? Like how they're
First is going to be, what are you doing with your horse? So when I talk to dressage riders, it's a completely different conversation because they have to have a dressage legal bit. So, but I have for years, when I speak to dressage riders, recommended the combination bit because there's no bit that will let you get a horse on the vertical the way a combination bit will. And then just before test, if you loosen up the chin strap, you move the reins up to the big ring, it will feel like a loose ring, and then you switch over to your loose ring for your test and go back to the combo bit for schooling. But for English, there's not a lot of choice. So you have either a plain ring bit, you have the cheeks with hooks, Kimberwicks, Pelhams, that's it. So the Kimberwick and Pelham, I'm a fan of the Kimberwick because the Kimberwick, I had one up here. What did I do with it? Here it is. So the nice thing about a Kimberwick for me is I'm always looking to get away from direct rein action. So direct rein action is when you have a ring bit and you just pull or not pull. That's direct rein action. Indirect rein action would be when you pull, you engage the rein, the cheek piece rotates and engages the chin and the pole. It's always, indirect rein action is always clearer for a horse because you're using multiple pressure points instead of just pulling on the tongue. So the Kimberwick is a really nice cheek piece because it has a snaffle rein position and a curb rein position. Whoops. So I don't use the snaffle because that's, again, it's just pulling or not pulling. But if you use the curb rein, you will get the lift. And the Kimberwick is essentially an English shank bit. That's its role. The Kimberwick and the Pelham are shank bits. And so you get a little leverage, but you're not going to get a lot of leverage. It's a very small amount. And it gives you the indirect rein action that allows you to use the chin and the pole and the bar and the lip in addition to the mouthpiece. But you really don't have that many choices. So if you are doing anything aside from dressage, I would definitely recommend the cheek with hooks at the very least. And then the Kimberwick if you're comfortable with it. A lot of people get intimidated by Kimberwicks because of the chain, but the chain, I mean, the standard chain, not just on Mylar, is a double flat link. And if you want to feel how it feels on your horse, you can just put it over the bone of your finger and whoops, and pull down. And it's a flat link, so it distributes it's just basically a band of pressure. There's no bite to it. There's no cutting edge to it. So people get a little intimidated by that. But if you remember that the curb is there to keep the bit from over rotating, that's what it's, I always do the backwards thing wrong. That's what its purpose in life is. Then it will help your horse. It basically pre-signals the mouth pressure to come, and it engages the pole. So it will help your horse anticipate the mouth pressure and give to the bit more readily. And so it's a really nice cheek piece. But at the end of the day, it's really your hands. And in English, they're all ring bits with the exception of the Kimberwick and Pelham. So it's just, there's just not that many choices. When you get into Western, then shank length is a consideration. And basically, the softer and lighter your hands are, the better off with a longer shank. Like that one that you guys have, that 7-inch shank, that would work really well for someone with a pretty soft or slow hand. I don't know where, is that's a combo bit. Like that one rogue Western bit. Yeah. So that one rogue Western bit, that's leverage. And so that longer shank, a slow, soft hand, if you have a heavy hand, a shorter shank will do better, or a cheek with hooks. But that's really it. There's not that much to choose on your hands.
All right. So it does look like we're closing in on our hour here.
Yeah.
So basically, to recap what we've talked about, you can tell me if I'm wrong or not. The mouthpiece is for the horse. Your level 1 is a lot of tongue pressure, and your level 3 is the most tongue relief, right?
Correct. Good job.
And then the cheek pieces are mostly for the rider and how they want to use their rein aids. Goodness, I can't talk anymore today. And then we covered our trial program that we have. And then I'll say it one more time. Watch our Facebook page for the rest of today to see how you can win the Dale Myler bit fitting and a free Mylar of your choice.
I just wanted to add to that, Elisabeth, the consult with Dale is going to be phone or email. I didn't want anybody to think that Dale's going to go to wherever they are, because that's not.
Got it. Phone or email. Got it.
Phone or email. He will be happy to talk to you for as long as you need to help you figure out what bit you need for your horse. And then whatever bit it is, you get to win it.
It's still a great chance Thank
Yep.
you so much for joining us today and helping me and everyone else here and following us on Facebook Live. Thank you for helping us figure out how to exactly bid our horses and kind of giving me especially something to play with.
Yeah, for sure. Well, thank you for having me. It was great meeting with you.
Yeah, thank you very much. And we will answer questions on Facebook or text message for the rest of the day.
Yep, I'll check in if you have anything to help with.
Perfect. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.